Hey everybody, coming to you today at the top of Storm Peak, one of the really beautiful places here in Steamboat Springs. I like to do something here on the mountain, and I realize this is really my last chance. Like, the ski year is about to close next weekend, and I'm not going to be able to ski on that weekend, so I wanted to get up here today and share a little bit with you in this beautiful place. I want to talk about the question, do only Christians go to heaven? I hear this question from time to time, and it's an interesting question, but I think I want to start by talking about an even more interesting question that underlies it. And that question is, what is heaven? What is this thing that we call heaven? You know, what are your anticipations or expectations or images of what that might be? I think a lot of our images are formed by art in the old days, by books, by movies, by television shows, things that kind of imagine what it might be like in the life to come. You know, like we wonder, is there really a stairway? Is there a stairway to heaven? Is there a chairlift? You know, sometimes coming up Storm Peak chairlift when you're in the fog, it feels like you're maybe going up into heaven. Are there pearly gates? Is St. Peter there? Does he have a book? Is my name in the book? Is your name in the book? So many images that we might have. I asked our men's group, what are some images that you have of heaven? And one of the responses was Steamboat Springs. I thought, oh yeah, a lot of us can relate to that answer. So many times I've been on this mountain or in other mountains around here and stopped and just had the thought, if I died right now and went to heaven, it couldn't be any more beautiful than this. This is kind of one of those days here today. We're so blessed to have this beauty all around us. And I think some of the reason the images that we have are from a lot of these other places are because in the scriptures, we don't really get much of a picture of what heaven is or what comes next. Jesus comes out of the Jewish tradition, and in the Jewish tradition, there's really no notion of heaven, this place of beauty and goodness that we go when we die for eternity. There's really not that kind of sentiment. There's a beautiful sentiment in the Jewish tradition that when someone dies, you crack the window so that their spirit might be set free. It's a really beautiful sentiment to crack the window that they may go free. But then Jesus comes along and he talks a fair amount about heaven. But so often when Jesus talks about heaven, it really has more to do with the here and now rather than what it's like there. For example, in the Great Prayer, he says, let it be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let it be here. In the Beatitudes, he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We hear Jesus talk about the kingdom of heaven is like this, and he has many different examples. One of those examples that Jesus talks about is the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, this little seed that's planted in the ground, and when it grows up, it becomes this beautiful tree, bush, and the birds come and make their home in it. It's about this little thing that seems insignificant, but really is not, really is beautiful and a place that becomes home for many creatures. Or he says the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl. It's so beautiful that the person has to go out and sell everything they have just to buy that one pearl because it's more beautiful, more special, more valuable than anything else. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is kind of like children. He says, unless you become like a little child, you will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So maybe there's a simplicity about it as well. Probably the closest Jesus comes to telling us what it might be like is in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of John, when he says that in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. And he says, I go to prepare a place for you, and I will take you there that you may be where I am. He says these beautiful words, do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. And says, peace be with you. I love here that Jesus imagines heaven as a home, in the best sense of that word home, the place where you belong, the place where you are loved, the place where you find joy and acceptance, the place where you smile and you laugh and you share meals. He says it will be a home. And in that home, there are many dwelling places. You know why you have a home with many dwelling places? Because there is a room for a lot of people. I like to envision heaven as that home with rooms that never end. There is space for everybody in that place. And then in the book of Revelation, we see at the end of things, that writer says there'll be a time when there will be no more pain and no more crying and no more death, because these things will be no more. And he goes on to talk about the beauty that will be to come. He says, you won't need lights because God will be their light. And there'll be a river that runs through the middle of it, the river of life. And on the sides of that river will be trees, and the leaves of those trees will be for the healing of all people. A really beautiful image of what might be in store for us. So I think if we put together what we hear in the scriptures and what comes to us in movies and arts and creativity and our own experience, I think there's 4 things that maybe characterize heaven for a lot of us. One is that there's more. This isn't all there is. There is more to come, more out in front of us. That the more is a place that's enveloped in the presence of God, that the presence of God is all over the midst of the more. That more is beautiful. There's beauty. There's so much beauty there. And that somehow we're connected to our loved ones, that we have a oneness, a connection. This love that never ends is kind of drawn together and binds us together. In the end, there's more. Filled with the presence of God, it's beautiful and connects us to those who we've loved and lost. So, all right, we might not know much of what heaven is. Maybe we brush up against it and get a little bit of a glimpse. But the question was, who gets to go there? Do only Christians go to heaven? And I want to say, you think I'm going to answer that question? Like, come on. That question is so far above my pay grade. That's not my question to answer. And I do think when Christians make this exclusivist claim that only Christians go to heaven, I think it does so much damage and so much harm. Think about what that sounds like to people. Hey, there's a place for all eternity where there's goodness and love and beauty and blessing. It's so amazing. But only we go. Other people don't go. In fact, most people don't go. Just us. We're the only ones. It's like God's gated community, and only we are the ones who can go in there. It does so much harm and damage. And I just want to wrap this up by using a little story that kind of envisions what I think about this question a little bit. There's a story from Pete Rollins that I've told many times before. He tells a story about a friend of his who wrote a story. And in this story that he wrote, he says he fell asleep. And when he was sleeping, he died. And when he died, he went up to heaven. And St. Peter was there. There really were pearly gates. And St. Peter was really there. And St. Peter sees him. He says, "Oh, Phil, come on in. Great to see you. Come on in." And he's about to enter into heaven. He's about to take that step into that threshold. But then he notices that some of his friends have come around behind him. He sees them, and some of his friends are Buddhists, and some are Muslims, and some are Jews. And he says, "Well, St. Peter, what about my friends? Can they come too?" And St. Peter looks at him and says, "Well, you know the rules, right? You know the rules." And he stands there, 1 foot from heaven. And as he stands there, he thinks about his reference point, Jesus. He thinks about the one who was born in the barn, the one who they called a drunkard and a bastard, the one who hung out with sinners, the one who always lifted up those who were down low, the one who brought everyone inside, the one who never left anyone behind but loved everybody. And he says to St. Peter, St. Peter, I think I'm just going to stay out here with them. And the story ends with St. Peter breaking into a big smile and saying, at last, you understand." I think that's such a beautiful story. Whatever this thing is that we call heaven, it's not about how do I get in or you get in. It's about how do all of us together find our way? How do we hold on to each other in a way that we don't leave anybody behind? Because if we don't all go together, and we leave lots of people out, and we leave lots of people behind on the outside, how could you ever call it heaven? Yeah. Well, I appreciate you joining me. It's a beautiful day. It's time to go ski, and grace and peace be with you.